I'm going to paint the whole picture of Australia's climate problem and what a just climate solution looks like.
Difficult this drought funding is going to be the longer this drought goes, and it will be an increasing problem for the federal government.
Australia is a vast, unique landmass, famous for its stunning natural beauty and wide open spaces. But despite its size, spanning over 7.6 million square kilometers, it remains one of the most sparsely populated countries in the world. A shocking 90% of Australia is uninhabited or sparsely populated. How is it that such a large, resource-rich country is so empty? The answer lies in a combination of its extreme climate, geographic isolation, historical development, and modern urbanization patterns. Act 1. Geographic challenges of the Australian outback. To understand why Australia is so empty, we must first take a look at its geography. Australia is the world's 6th largest country by total land area, but its population is concentrated in a few small pockets along the eastern, southeastern, and southwestern coastlines. The vast interior of Australia, known as the outback, is one of the most inhospitable places on Earth. It's a land of extremes, extremely hot summers, arid deserts, and vast stretches of barren land. The outback is not just one massive desert. It is a collection of dry, remote regions, including the Great Victoria Desert, the Simpson Desert, and the Gibson Desert. Geography expert.
In the last 20 years, where the climate has become noticeably hotter and drier.
The outback represents around 70% of the Australian landmass, but it receives very little rainfall. For example, parts of the outback may go years without significant rain, and temperatures can soar above 40 degrees Celsius, 104 degrees Fahrenheit, during the summer months.
Queensland has also copped a drenching over the past 24 hours, with some parts seeing more than 10 times the July average in a single day. This was especially bad for music lovers heading to Birdsville's Big Red Bash.
These environmental challenges make it difficult to establish communities. Water is scarce, and the land is often unsuitable for traditional agriculture. Although there are valuable natural resources buried beneath the surface, mining and other industries have limited presence in these areas due to the harsh conditions. Act 2. The harsh reality of Australia's interior. Australia's climate is a critical factor in the sparsity of its population. While coastal areas enjoy a temperate climate, the vast majority of the country suffers from extreme heat, limited rainfall, and occasional droughts.
It starts to lift and you can see the light again and hope that things can improve.
The heavens have opened up across large parts of New South Wales. Dust has turned into puddles.
Australia is one of the driest continents on Earth. On average, it receives only around 500 mm of rainfall a year, which is well below the global average. In the outback, some areas receive less than 100 mm annually, which means that water scarcity is a constant concern. In addition to the aridity, Australia faces extreme seasonal fluctuations. In the summer, temperatures in the outback can exceed 45 degrees Celsius, 113 degrees Fahrenheit, making the environment unbearable for human settlement. The lack of consistent rainfall, combined with high evaporation rates, leaves much of the interior uninhabitable. These climatic conditions don't just affect human habitation, they also impact agriculture and other economic activities. While agriculture thrives in the more fertile and temperate coastal regions, the interior struggles to sustain large-scale farming. Act 3. Early settlement patterns, the coastal focus. Historically, Australia's settlement was always focused on the coastline. When British settlers arrived in 1788, they established colonies on the eastern coast, where the climate was more forgiving and water was more abundant. The first settlements, like Sydney and Melbourne, were built along rivers and harbours, making them ideal locations for ports and trade. The early European settlers didn't venture much into the interior. The harshness of the environment, combined with a lack of knowledge about the land, meant that they focused on the areas that could provide them with the basics: water, fertile soil, and easier access to shipping routes. As the years went on, these coastal cities grew rapidly, and the interior remained largely neglected. While some expeditions into the interior were made, these were typically met with failure due to the unwelcoming terrain and lack of resources. Even by the mid-1800s, large portions of the interior were still unknown to Europeans. Act 4. Economic development and urbanization. In the 20th and 21st centuries, Australia's economic development continued to revolve around its coastlines. Major cities like Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane, and Perth became the focal points for industry, trade, and cultural development. With a population of over 25 million people, nearly 85% of Australians live within 50 kilometers of the coast, with more than 60% residing in just 5 major cities. Urbanization in Australia has been shaped by both historical and environmental factors. Australia's economy is heavily driven by industries that are located near the coast, including tourism, fishing, mining, and agriculture.
A focus on climate justice ensures costs and benefits of climate problems and solutions are experienced equitably.
Coastal areas offer easier access to ports, which facilitate both export and import activities. This has led to a situation where the coastal regions are densely populated, while the inland areas remain almost entirely uninhabited. Act 5. Indigenous Populations and the Challenge of Displacement. It's also important to consider the impact of European settlement on Australia's indigenous populations. Prior to European colonization, Indigenous Australians lived across the entire continent, including the outback. Their nomadic lifestyle, which was closely tied to the environment, enabled them to survive in the harsh conditions of the interior. Indigenous Australians have adapted to the country's extreme climates for over 65,000 years. Their deep knowledge of the land, water sources, and ecosystems allowed them to live successfully in the outback. However, European settlement led to the displacement of many indigenous communities, pushing them to the fringes of society. The Australian government's policies of assimilation and land ownership created significant challenges for the indigenous population, with many living in rural areas or urban slums today. Act 6. Technological Advances and Future Prospects. As technology has advanced, there have been attempts to open up Australia's interior for habitation. New water management techniques, including desalination plants and water conservation methods, have made some areas of the outback more viable for settlement. Mining and resource extraction technologies have also made it easier to access the wealth buried beneath the earth. But even with these advancements, the interior remains a challenging environment for large-scale settlement. While remote mining towns and indigenous communities have persisted in some areas, the extreme weather, long distances between settlements, and lack of infrastructure continue to limit widespread habitation. The interior remains sparsely populated because it requires massive infrastructure investment. While some industries like mining have thrived in the outback, for most people living in these areas simply isn't practical. The cost of living, the lack of essential services, and the environmental conditions all contribute to the fact that people continue to gravitate towards the coast. A land of possibilities. Australia, with its vast landscapes and natural resources, presents a paradox. While it is one of the largest countries in the world, its population is concentrated in a few coastal cities. The other 90% of the country, much of it in the outback, remains uninhabited due to a combination of geographic, environmental, historical, and economic factors. Australia's story is one of adaptation to extreme conditions, of human ingenuity against the forces of nature. The future of the Australian interior may depend on continued technological innovations and how society chooses to address the challenges of living in such an unforgiving environment. Until then, the vast expanses of Australia will likely remain empty, silent reminders of the challenges that come with surviving on one of the most extreme continents on Earth.